Well, that's my cue, everyone. Good afternoon. Bienvenidos. A very, very good day to you all, wherever you are joining us from in the world today. You've joined us for Cultivating Voices, live poetry. I'm your host, Sandy Yanone, and today I truly am having chills just thinking about what I'm about to say. And frankly, a little choked up, is our tribute to the legendary poet Janice Mirikitani, who with Mary Oishi and Tanya Ko Hong joined us in May of 2020. It was May 16th, 2020. It was during Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, of course, which it is now. And perhaps more importantly for that day, that May 16th, that program was in response to an experience we had had on Cultivating Voices in World Poetry Day. This was in 2021. Sorry, I think I said 2020. May 16th, 2021. On World Poetry Day in March, we had an incredible carousel of poets. Tanya Ko Hong was one of those poets. And days before had been the horrific shootings in Atlanta targeting Asian American women in a spa. And after Tanya's appearance that Sunday in March, I felt very strongly that we needed to do something to amplify voices. So it wasn't necessarily that it was May that does celebrate Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And as you all know, and I say this about all of the months that celebrate and amplify different identities, voices, we shouldn't relegate that to any one month or day. You know, we should be celebrating this all the time. Nonetheless, because the original program with Janice Mirikitani, Mary Oishi, and Tanya Ko Hong was in May, as we were moving into 2024, I thought about how amazing it would be, particularly after I had discovered about the publication, the reprinting through the University of Washington Press of Janice's book, Awake in the River and Shedding Silence, which came into being through the University of Washington Press at the vision of curator Shawn Wong, who is here today. Shawn is the curator of the Classics of Asian American Literature at the University of Washington. And once I saw the book, I felt like, yes, we have all the pieces. Let's bring Janice back with us. And so today, here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, we've brought back Mary and Tanya to revisit and share Janice's work in celebration and an honoring of that day and of her incredible legacy. We have Shawn Wong with us, of course, the curator of the series that put this book back, two of her collections in one book back into print. And my friends, we have Tianne Feliciano, who is Janice Mirikitani's daughter, with us today to share in this celebration of her mother's life and legacy. And I want, of course, first to welcome all of you here in Zoom. Thank you for joining us live. Thank you for those of you watching us here on Facebook. And of course, the many of you who are watching this recording. I know that you will be witness to an amazing literary experience as the experience we had on May 16th, 2021, in our conversations across 3 generations of Asian American women poets. And of course, those poets were Mary Oishi, Tanya Ko Hong, and Janice Mirikitani. Well, before we see a clip of Janice and get to hear her words to begin the program, I want to also thank everyone who joined us for last week's program. We had an incredible new book showcase that was also in the spirit of collaboration and of, amplifying voices in unique ways. And I want to thank everyone who participated in that program. Those of you, our readers, of course, for that program, as well as those of you, well, hundreds and hundreds of you that have now watched that program. Well, as I said, today we are highlighting, amplifying, celebrating, rejoicing. And, there's a little bit of the grief, there's a little bit of the sadness. But I know that we're going to do our best to use poetry and be with Janice's poetry to do what poetry does best, which is really to kind of elevate our souls and bring us to our best selves, even sometimes when it's bringing us to our knees. And that was the kind of poetry that Janice Mirikitani created in her exceptional life, in her exceptional lifetime. Kim Ports Parsons is going to be putting into the chat an amazing biography of Janice with numerous details of her life. I hope you'll take some time to read that longer biography of her life and her legacy as we move into the program. Want to remind you all today that the chat is live for you to show your appreciations of our guests who are with us today. I hope you will do that generously and, of course, respectfully, as always. And, it is just with the most immense, I don't even have words for most of today, to be honest. I'm privileged, I'm honored to be able to be putting this program together with Don and Kim, of course, as they always are, but also to have had the support and the vision of Shawn, Mary, Tanya, and Tianne to do this program. So without further ado, let me cue Don Krieger to show us our first clip of Janice Mirikitani from our program on May 16th, 2021. All of this comes from just my own kind of attempt at humanity and my own deep curiosity. I'm curious about when did you know that you would be able to use your voice to lift the stories and the history that was frozen by violence. Also, from your mother's perspective, you know, at what point did you recognize that you would carry the stories and kind of continue that legacy of continuing to make sure that you know, that silence would not prevail?
Well, I think that we are frozen by violence in many, many ways. And I think that shame is perhaps the greatest silencer because, you know, it's the embarrassment, it is really the loss of face, being imprisoned for expediency, the most unjust kind of mass incarceration for absolutely no reason. There were no causes of, there was no proof of any kind of treason that was committed by any of the Japanese Americans and none by the new immigrants. And of course, 50% of the people incarcerated in these camps were children, and I was one of them. And I think through our lives, I mean, through my life, and I'm the oldest person here, so I've had a lot of experience with violence, including, you know, personal as well as relationship, and seeing the violence that has been perpetrated against Asian Americans with the recent historical hate crimes against us, as well as from slavery to prison camps for African American communities, and also the detention and the harassment of Latinx people, Mexican Americans, and of course the most horrific crimes against the Native Americans. I think we have all been silenced by the violence, not just because, you know, I mean, I think we carry our stories and we feel obligated and we feel compelled to tell our stories. But I believe that we've been frozen in silence by the establishment, by the institution of publishing, by the media, by, you know, history books, by the public school system, by every institution that has a responsibility to educate the people, the American people, and I mean all of us, all of the diversity of us. But all of our diverse histories have been omitted. And that's what I believe is a really violent act. And it's an act that continues against us. And it continues the stereotypes that continue to kill us.
Yeah. That is the singular Janice Mirikitani from our program, Cultivating Voices Live Poetry of May 16th, 2021. And now I'm going to introduce and turn to our first guest, which I'm sure in response to that, you know, your work, Shawn Wong, was to make sure that those things that Janice was speaking to there were and will continue to be part of the collective conversation by bringing her books back into print. And Shawn Wong is professor at University of Washington and is the curator of the Classics of Asian American Literature series at the university, among many, many other accolades. I want to ask you, Shawn, and again, thank you for being here with us today. What inspired you to bring Janice's poetry back into print? Of all the choices and voices that you have the capacity to bring back in the classics of Asian American literature, what was it about Janice Mirikitani and her work that inspired you?
Thank you, Sandy, and and thank you for the opportunity to commemorate and honor Janice. Quite simply, you know, when I was thinking about rescuing out of print Asian American texts, there are so many of them. The one that came to mind for my purposes was definitely Janice, and she, for several reasons, some of them personal and some of them responsibility to the field of Asian American literature. But, you know, I think everyone could agree that she is sort of the godmother of Asian American literature. She gave me my first poetry reading when I was totally unpublished and unknown. She called me on the phone and asked me to come to Glide and read my poetry. And I was taken aback because I was completely unknown. But she had heard from somebody that I wrote poetry. And so that was my entrance to that wonderful place, Glide. And also, at the age of 21, the Glide Urban Center hired me to edit their national newsletter. I was still an undergraduate at Berkeley, and I got the chance to work with Janice and also report on the various programs that were active at Glide Urban Center, and it was quite an education. I learned so much more about the world by being able to work with Janice and Cecil at the Glide Urban Center, and for them to trust me with their national newsletter at at the age of 21 was astounding, even though at that time, obviously being 21, I knew everything. And of course now I don't know anything, but I contacted Janice about the book, and I just felt it was my duty as an Asian American writer to bring her books back into print. And I want to read an email that she sent to me after I notified her. She said, this was in June 2020, "I am sometimes taken aback thinking about being at Glide for 55 years, now in the position of co-founder along with Cecil. We are working part-time, still fundraising and hopefully hell-raising. These are familiar and encouraging times because of our renewed activism and so many new voices shouting for justice, but also concerning because of COVID. It's great to remember our historical relationship and all the great contributions and revolutionary work you have done in so many areas, but especially for Asian American voices in publishing. Thank you for your visionary commitment." And so, what's amazing about Janice is I'm trying to honor her, and she takes the time to to say those words to me and to recognize the work that I do. And that was so much like her to take what I was trying to do for her, and also commend me for doing something that we all should be doing, naturally. And I think the one last thing I want to say is the other thing that compelled me to honor Janice with the republication of her book, which unfortunately came out, I think, just a few weeks after her death, and we were so devastated by that she couldn't be there for the book launch. I remember giving a poetry reading at Berkeley Public Library, downtown Berkeley Public Library. And I didn't think anybody was going to show up. Nobody really knew me. I was still in graduate school, I think, at San Francisco State. And I was waiting for the 2 or 3 people who would show up. And I think the reading was being held in the children's book section. And suddenly Cecil and Janice show up. That's not something, I think that was certainly high on their priority list or agenda, but I was just so amazed that they got in their car and came to Berkeley and attended my reading. And I think that really says something about them and their support of every writer, no matter how famous or unpublished or anything. They took the time to really uplift everybody. And that was, I think, in the hundreds of readings I've given in my lifetime, I still remember that one as being so significant and so meaningful just by the fact of their presence.
Well, thank you for sharing your stories of Janice. And I agree with you that that email in particular, I mean, really says so much about her character, her integrity, what was at the core of her being, would be to make sure that she knew that she was still watching you do your work and
Yeah,
appreciate it, right?
definitely. Yeah.
And and in that regard, I wanna just say personally that thank you for bringing her work back into print. It's to me it's shocking that it's not shocking that it went out of print. I mean, we heard Janice talk about publication in the clip that we saw and the perils of that. But what I am like truly appreciating and hoping is that, you will feel a sense of pride as we go through the program and knowing your contribution of this amazing act of activism that you have taken to continue in the spirit of her legacy. And of course, you have a long association with her as well as with her partner in life and partner in work, Cecil B. Williams from the Glide Foundation. So thank you so much for putting this book back into print, which, as I said, I walked by the shelf of I was on Bainbridge Island, and it was months after her passing, and there was the book. It jumped out at me on the shelf that evening that I was at the poetry reading on Bainbridge in October of 2020, of just this past, just this past year in 2023. And I said, oh my gosh, we have to do something with that. And little to know that you, the actual curator of the book, was sitting there in the audience with me that night. So thank you, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the program.
And
Folks,
Janice would scold me for not helping her sell her book. It just so happens at the present time, if you go on the UW Press website, everyone can get the book at 40% off with free shipping.
yay, I'm all for that. I'm going to keep saying that today too. Okay.
And I'm sure Janice would be very appreciative that we also pay attention to putting her book in the hands of new readers. Thank you, Sandy.
Indeed. Thank you. Well, now we will hear again from Janice Mirikitani with a clip of one of her poems from that day in May 16th, 2021.
Thank you. This poem is entitled A Woman with Straight Back. It is for my mother, who after 40 years of silence testified before the Commission on Wartime Relocation of Japanese American Citizens. Her testimony, along with hundreds of others, resulted in the signing of the Redress Bill in August of 1988. I am the stone, my mother says, smooth, oval. My memory is a chisel from which I shape my mouth. The stone hangs down her neck, tied by the thinnest chain, invisible around her throat. She wore it close to her skin, like normal garment. The weight of it caused her to straighten her back, chin high, rising against it. To understand, you must contemplate pride, she said, not the insolence of vanity or conceit. It is called face, controlled emotion, self-consequence, quiet dignity. dolomite, greenstone, granite. She pulls against the growing weight, stone on stone, like each moment dropped into the mute well of memory. She worked building the farm, precious well water, pregnant with her first child, plowing, planting the seeds. Sudden invasions by government men who slit the sacks of grain to pour like gold into their bins. They let the apples rot, gravel the soiled seed for heavy trucks and machinery. Guilty by reason of race and nationality, the military accused, and sent us to horse stalls, steaming with manure, where we were precious well watered, and then boarded first child us onto trains with shade-drawn windows, taking only what she could carry, an infant at her breast, and bundles strapped to her back. My mother bore the endless dark ride to Arkansas swamps and one-room barracks. There were open toilets for women who hid their shame, covered their heads with paper sacks. I delivered mail in camp, she tells. The letters weighed like slabstone to an old couple whose 5 sons enlisted in the US Army to prove that they were loyal Americans. All 5 were killed in combat. The mail, heavier than weapons. Carefully, she chisels a woman's mouth into the stone she lifts from her neck. Obsidian, serpentine, bloodstone. Today, the redress bill is signed. Her body is lighter than water. With the chisel of her tongue, she shapes the curve of her words. To understand, contemplate pride, she says. Yes, I will take the reparations. It's not the amount. No monetary measure can price injustice and loss and humiliation. The years of face, silent as stone. But if it'll make them think twice before they do it again to anyone else, I'll stay alive to exact an apology as physical as a gash across their national budget. Memory is a chiseled shape of a woman with straight back, holding a rock the size of an apology. She will stand chin high at the doorway of history, and no, we none will go into those camps again.
Everyone, that is Janice Mirikitani from the reading in May 16th, 2021, or conversations across 3 generations of Asian American women poets that she shared that stage with that day with Mary Oishi and Tanya Ko Hong, who are with us today. With us also today is Janice's daughter. And I particularly want to thank Tianne Feliciano for joining us today. As you know, Janice passed away in July of 2021, just a couple months after the program that we're seeing Janice speak from today. But just recently, the Reverend Cecil Williams passed away. And so it's with some deep sadness and also an opportunity to also elevate his amazing legacy and their legacy together of the work that they did for decades at the Glide Foundation, standing side by side and doing their good work worldwide. And I just wanted to acknowledge the Reverend Williams and to extend, my condolences to Tianne Feliciano and your family for the loss of Cecil now, as we're doing this program today, to honor Janice's legacy. And before I ask Tianne to speak a little bit in response to a question I have for you, I want to let folks know that Tianne Feliciano works in the Bay Area as an administrator. She was adamant to tell me that she's like, I'm not a poet. I know you're shaking your head. I'm not a poet. But she's very devoted to and supportive of extending her mother's legacy. And it was equally as impressive to be in your presence, to be able to hear your perspective, as it was to be in the presence of your mother, which for me as a poet was incredible to be in her presence, even through these little Zoom squares. So I want to thank you so very much, particularly at this particular time in the life of your family, for returning for this program. And my question is, can you talk a little bit and share with us what living with your mother's legacy has inspired for you? What's your relationship, ongoing relationship with her poetry? And I know that you're going to share one of her poems with us as well. So thank you again for being here today.
Yes, thank you, Sandy. And thank you all for doing this for my mother. I know that she would or is looking down and really appreciating it herself. And thank you for your condolences. It has been quite a bit to happen all at once. I will say that. But Cecil is now with my mom, I feel, and they're together again, and I hope that brings them peace. To answer your question, like you said, I'm not a poet. I am not I don't read a lot of poetry, but after she passed, I read a lot of her work because I had to clean out her rooms. And I read both her published works and her unpublished works. And I would say that how it's inspired me is, her life and how she brought me up was to always have compassion for everyone and be the kindest person that I could be. And I think I've tried to live my life that way. And I think that's how she's inspired me to be, not to, to have an open mind and not, give into, racial hate or discrimination or just, it helps to have grown and been brought up and born and raised in San Francisco as well. I have a lot of, the environment is very liberal, and, my friends just grew up in a very diverse environment, and I appreciate that. But I will say that her poetry, reading her, I even found like the first poem she ever published when she was a teenager, or maybe she was even younger than a teenager. It just really was interesting to see how her work had really translate into who she was and her beliefs and her life experiences. And I will say that some of it's really hard and raw and angry, And it really was all her, you know, she had all those sides and parts and experiences. So that's how I would say her poetry has inspired me. And then I was going to read a poem that she wrote for me. It's a pretty famous one. It's from the book Awake in the River and Shedding Silence, the one that you are talking about today, and it's Sing with Your Body. That's right. For my daughter, Tianne Tsukiko. We love with great difficulty, spinning in one place, afraid to create spaces, new rhythm. The beat of a child dangled by her own inner ear takes Aretha with her, upstairs somewhere. Go quickly, Tsukiko, into your circle dance. Go quickly, before your steps are halted by who you are not. Go quickly to learn the mixed sounds of your tongue. Go quickly to who you are before your mother swallows what she has lost. And yeah, it's very representative of my mom's experience with me as a teenager. So thank you again.
Thank you, for again adding, the next level of generation to the stories that we're presenting today, in honor of poet, activist, incredible human, Janice Mirikitani. Thank you so much, Tianne. And again, there's very few people that are going to be able to hear, your stories of you talking about, finding your mother's poem from what that she wrote perhaps when she was even a preteen, and for us to be able to now have these stories, these are recorded now, so we just keep extending the legacy. I so much appreciate your time and your voice, and be well and go in peace.
Thank you very much, Sandy. And thank you everyone for attending this for my mother today.
Well, we now turn to the first of our guests, who of course were with us on May 16th, 2021. These three women, Janice and Mary Oishi and Tanya Ko Hong, met weeks before, a couple different times, to create the program. I attended one of the meetings very briefly. I really wanted to give them space to shape the program for that day. And they did a remarkable, remarkable job. And of course, you can go back and watch that program as well, which I hope you will do, to see it all in the context as it unfolded. So I'm very happy today to introduce Mary Oishi, who of course needs no introduction in this Zoom room. Mary Oishi's been part of Cultivating Voices since she joined us on our Laureate Love Fest in February of 2021. I believe that was your first appearance, and has been with us many, many times. Mary, as you know, among other things, is Poet Laureate Emerita of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and she is the author of her latest collection from the University of New Mexico Press, Sidewalk Cruise Ship, which we've heard from on Cultivating Voices. Well, Mary, thank you again for being here. I'm having a range of emotions as I'm sitting here experiencing this program unfolding. And I want to ask you, clearly from our conversations before, during, and after that program, it's clear that, Janice had such a profound influence on your life as a poet. And can you remind us of that influence? You spoke about it on that program, but can you remind us of that influence as a window into her legacy, and discuss also what it was like to be in her presence that day in 2021 online, and what it means to return today to reflect on her legacy. And thank you, as always, for being with us and always willing to step up, really just as she did.
Well, thank you, Sandy, for hosting this. I really am so honored to be part of this tribute to her. I first encountered her when I was in my 30s, and I had sent some poems away to a poetry journal. And, rejection letters are one thing, but this one came back basically saying not only was he not accepting the poems, but basically that I wasn't a poet. I mean, more or less, that's what he said, not in those words. But I was so discouraged that I thought, well, okay, I'll just be like Emily Dickinson. I'll put all my poems in a drawer. I can't help but write because I've always written since I was, an adolescent. And but I'll just wait, and maybe after I die, someone will find some value in them. And then right after that, my friend gave me Shedding Silence by Janice Mirikitani. And I read it and I said, wait a minute, I am too a poet. I'm a Japanese American poet, because I recognized something in her voice that spoke to me very much. I mean, I felt a kinship, and not that I was, the caliber of poet she is, but I felt that, and it inspired me to keep going and to keep getting my, putting my work out there, both in performance at readings and in publishing. So she was just the catalyst for me not burying myself and hermiting myself as a poet. So I really admired her from afar. And then I had the opportunity to book some poets and other performers for speakers and so on for a protest that was happening in Los Alamos, New Mexico, of course, the birthplace of the bomb. And I was familiar with her writings about Hiroshima, and it was the 60th anniversary, and they had a big protest up there, and we put lanterns out on the lake and everything. And so I contacted her and said, would you be willing to come and read your poetry there? And she came with Reverend Cecil Williams. And it was amazing because when she got up to read her poem, by this beginning of the second poem, very uncharacteristic for New Mexico, this storm cloud rolled in, and there was lightning and thunder. It made it so kind of epic. And he held this huge umbrella over her and shielded her from the storm. But it was a really memorable scene, with her standing there, him holding the big black umbrella over her, and her reading this poem about Hiroshima. It was so powerful. It was so powerful. The crowd wouldn't even disperse because they wanted to hear it. And it was really, really that was my first actual meeting. And at that meeting with her, I told her what encountering her work did for me. And so we kind of had it was almost like a sisterhood or something developed from that. And then she eventually wrote an endorsement for the collection that I wrote with my daughter in 2018. And then I interviewed her in 2021 on her 80th birthday for the big read in Las Cruces. They had the Thomas Brannigan Library there had gotten the grant, the big read, and it was for a book about the internment camps, the Japanese American concentration camps, really. And so I asked if I could, they asked me if I could interview someone, and I chose her because of her writings about the camps. And so I didn't know it was her 80th birthday, but until we got into the interview, but that was really just such a wonderful experience for me to spend an hour with her and do that interview. And then when Sandy suggested, I actually sent her a copy of that interview, and then Sandy suggested that I pull together this event for May in response to the hate crimes that were on the rise against Asian Americans. And I thought it was good to show people who wanted to be allies that the Asian American experience is not a monolithic experience. We are coming at it from all sorts of different frames. For example, Janice went through the concentration camp experience as an infant, and all the repercussions that it had on her family, her mother and her family in general. And I think that was one experience, and she was an American citizen going through that. And then there was also, Tanya Ko Hong's experience, which I'm sure she'll talk about herself, of being a recent immigrant. And then my experience, which is some Asian Americans' experience as well, and that is, not being raised by my biological family, biological family, but it was my father's family. And so there are people who are adopted or things like that. So, there's all sorts, there's huge variety. And so that's what we brought forward in that. And we talked many times on the phone to plan that experience, and Janice's wisdom was just amazing. And, we kind of let her guide what we did, because she was really terrific and so insightful and thoughtful, and just one of the most caring people that I've ever met. And so I also used her poetry because I felt like it was a good example of how to write about trauma. And so I taught a workshop for Taos Writers Conference called Transforming Scars to Art. And it was about writing about trauma. And I asked if I could use her writing, which she agreed to. And I didn't realize it was 4 days before her passing that she sent me the email back saying, yes, of course you can use it. And she ended it with, I love you. And I thought it was very sweet, but so unusual. She had never done that in any of the correspondences that we had. And so I assumed that it was her notice to me before she left the world, but I didn't know that she was ill. So it was very shocking to me when actually it was Sandy who informed me. It was very shocking, and I was devastated because she is definitely, I consider her a mentor and one of my sheroes, I guess you could say. And I found in talking to her, in posting this to a Japanese American writers group, that is true of many of us. So I don't want to talk too much. You wanted me to read some of her poems, right? Okay, so this is an example of something about trauma. This is called In Remembrance for her uncle Minoru, who died January 1984. We gather at your coffin, Uncle Minoru. Mother, with her hands like gardenias, touches your sleeves. We whisper of how well you look, peaceful in your utter silence. How much we remember, why now, at death, your kindnesses, Uncle, as you crafted paper monkeys, multicolored birds to climb and jerk on a stick, to amuse children who gathered at your innocent dark eyes, always slightly moist. We would jump on your back, riding you like a silent horse as you lumbered on your hands and knees from room to room. How much we remember. We rode your shoulders knotted with hurt, dressed in faded denim, smelling like laundry soap and fish. You never complained of it, only through those dark, moist eyes and your smile that drew living animals to you, even wild birds. Obachan said they could smell the wounds hiding in your throat, the wound in your heart, pierced by unjust punishment, racism, and rejection, sharp as blades. When did you vow silence, Minoru? After the camps, after you buried a daughter, you slumped into a light of your own and let life ride you, your daughter thrown broken on the road by a drunken driver who mumbled. She flew from nowhere like a dumb chicken, stretched out $200, not one apology, and said we were safer in the camps. Was there nothing left to say, Minoru, as you slapped away his hot white hand? How much we remember when they took you to Amachi Gate, locked us up like herded horses, your dark, innocent eyes, moist with disbelief at charges of sabotage, espionage, your shoulders staggered from the lies, fear like a cold finger pressed at your heart. Life gasped like a beached fish, the sky scummed over with clouds, and punishment without crime, stabbed between the blades of your back. Was there nothing left to say? Minoru, the children who rode you have tongues like birds. We chatter. We remember the mounds of hurt at your shoulders. Could we but massage them to soothe the pain, but death makes our regrets scattered as apologies. We did not expect them to rip the coat of pride from your bones, nor the melody from your throat. Yes, there is much to say. We will leave your memory as a silent, rancid rose. Our tongues become livid with history and demands for reparations. Crimes are revealed like the bloody lashes of a fallen whip. The falsehoods, deletions, the conspiracy to legalize mass imprisonment. No, we will not forget Amachi Gate, Rower, Poston, Hart Mountain, Minidoka, Jerome, Gila River, Manzanar, Topaz, Tule Lake. Our tongues are sharp like blades. We overturn furrows of secrecy. Yes, we will harvest justice. And uncle, perhaps your spirit will return alive in a horse or a bird, riding free in the wind, life surging through the sinews of your strong shoulders. And yes, the struggle continues on with our stampede of voices. I think she is like so amazing writing about trauma. I admire that very much. And this is kind of a little more of a, I guess, more powerful response to trauma. And this is one of my favorites of hers as well. Her notes about this poem: after 40 years of silence about the experience of Japanese Americans in World War II, concentration camps, my mother testified before the Commission on Wartime Relocation and Internment of Japanese American Civilians in 1981. And she actually used quoted excerpts from her mother's testimony, but modified with her permission. It's called Breaking Silence. There are miracles that happen, she said, from the silences in the glass caves of our ears, from the crippled tongue, from the mute, wet eyelash, testimonies waiting like winter. We were told that silence was better, golden like our skin, useful like go quietly, easier like don't make waves, expedient like horse stalls and deserts. Mr. Commissioner, the U.S. Army Signal Corps confiscated our property. It was subjected to vandalism and ravage. All improvements we had made before our incarceration was stolen or destroyed. I was coerced into signing documents giving you authority to take. My mother, soft as tallow, words peeling from her like slivers of yellow flame, her testimony, a vat of boiling water surging through the coldest, bluest vein. She had come to her land as shovel, hoe, and sickle, searing reed and rock and dead brush, labored to sinew the ground, to soften gardens pregnant with seed, awaiting each silent morning, birthing fields of flowers, mustard greens and tomatoes throbbing like the sea. And then all was hushed for announcements. Take only what you can carry. We were made to believe our faces betrayed us. Our bodies were loud with yellow, screaming flesh needing to be silenced behind barbed wire. Mr. Commander, it seems we were singled out from others who were under suspicion. Our neighbors were of German and Italian descent, some of whom were not citizens. It seems we were singled out. She had worn her work like lemon leaves, shining in her sweat, driven by her dreams that honed the blade of her plow. The land she built like hope grew quietly. Irises, roses, sweet peas opening. And then all was hushed for announcements to be incarcerated for your own good. The sounds of her work bolted in barracks, silenced. Mr. Commissioner, so when you tell me I must limit my testimony, when you tell me my time is up, I tell you this. Pride has kept my lips pinned by nails, my rage coffined, but I exhume my past to claim my time. My youth is buried in Rower. Obachan's ghost visits Amachi Gate. My niece haunts Tule Lake. Words are better than tears, so I spill them. I kill the silence. There are miracles that happen, she said, and everything is made visible. We see the cracks and fissures in our soil. We speak of suicides and intimacies, of longings lush like wet furrows, of oceans bearing us toward imagined riches, of burning humiliations and crimes by the government, of self-hate and of love that breaks through silences. We are lightning and justice. Our souls become transparent like glass, revealing tears for war-dead sons, red ashes of Hiroshima, jagged wounds from barbed wire. We must recognize ourselves at last. We are a rainforest of color and noise. We hear everything. We are unafraid. Our language is beautiful.
That is Mary Oishi reading the singular poetry of Janice Mirikitani. And as I was listening to you read, Mary, I was just so, and thank you for your personal stories and of your connection and relationship with Janice. But as I was listening to the poems, what I continue to appreciate is how unafraid she was in writing what I think are, like, you know, they're epic poems of witness and of, you know, breaking and shedding silence. And she was not afraid to take space for her poetry. She was unafraid to do that. And I know so many poets, particularly women poets, who will not take the space, the full space on the page, you know, will not, you know, write the long poem that needs to be written and say what it needs to say fully, you know, and boldly. And that she is a tremendous example of that, of how to do that and the necessity of why it must be done. So those of you listening, watching, and considering what are, you know, there's many, many lessons here, but I think from a poet's perspective, I would encourage us to think about that her shedding silence shows us a path for all of us to shed the different silences we hold and keep. Thank you so much, Mary. And we'll look forward to more with you, of course, on Cultivating Voices, including the release of your latest collection, Sidewalk Cruise Ship. And of course, I'll see you in New Mexico very soon, next month.
I can't wait.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, our final featured guest is, of course, another poet that was with us on that day. And Tanya Ko Hong, as we've talked about, was the person that inspired me to reach out to Mary, who reached out to Janice, and then we brought Tanya in, and now, you know, the circle was created for that program on May 16th, 2021. And Tanya Ko Hong has been on our program a number of times as well. You know, she's a dedicated Cultivating Voices live poetry member and shared work from what I also consider another astounding, groundbreaking collection of poetry, The War Still Within, poems of the Korean diaspora. And if you've not heard Tanya read and or discuss the creation of that, of this particular collection about the comfort women, I encourage you to seek out, not only purchase the collection, but also seek out the many interviews that she has done online. And there's print versions as well, and read about the journey that she has taken to make sure that history is not silenced. So Tanya, thank you for joining us. I know you'll probably share how and where you're joining us from. It's always my deepest honor and pleasure to welcome you to the program. Folks, we think Tanya is on one of the phone lines here in the room. And so what I can tell you is Tanya is on.
Can you unmute me?
You're
Okay.
you're unmuted.
Now-
You're great. Oh, great to hear you.
Okay, good. I am so happy. I am walking Camino right now, so I am joining you at the Spain. So I've been walking, I think like about 140 miles now, and I wanted to see your face. I have my phone, and then I am trying to connect with you the phone, but somehow it won't let me link to the get in the Zoom. So I was able to connect with the phone. So I'm sorry that I cannot see your face. I love to see your face, but I'm sorry.
It's all
And
it's all good. We're so appreciative of you joining.
yeah,
Yeah. So I wanted
yeah.
to
So
ask, yeah, go ahead. I was
yeah,
gonna ask you a question to kind of lead into your remarks. Is that okay?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm aware from the, the program that we did together with Janice and with Mary
Mm,
that, we just heard Mary speak of Janice's significance to her life and influence on Mary as a poet. And Janice Mirikitani is of a different generation and a different Asian culture from your culture. And yet,
right.
I'd love to have you share the significance of her legacy and how it relates to your work, and share what it was like to be in conversation with her online in 2021 and what it means to return today as you literally are on your
Mm,
own very profound journey. And we appreciate you
mm,
taking time from that to be with us on this journey today.
yeah. Well, I wanted to say thank to my big sister Mary first, because without her introducing of Janice, I didn't know about Janice, and that was very, very how do I say, authentic. Our conversation before we have generate March 16. Cultivate a voice. We met a couple times online on the Zoom, and we talked about it. And then I didn't know about her, and then she is a different generation, and I didn't really hear about the story about the camp. I mean, of course, we hear about Japanese camp, but then I really didn't hear someone who's really talking about reality about that, because actually I know someone who went there, but she was very silent, and then she didn't want to talk about it at all. But Janice is talking about the Japanese camp was helped me to realize what kind of a circumstance they were living in United States. Even though they're American, they're treated not American. That I didn't get affected until she was really sharing with it, and then her story about her mother, that it was very affect me. And somehow it was very interesting during this journey, I sleeping the guest house and stuff like that. And someone was asking me, everybody says, where are you from? Where are you from? And then currently I live in New York as well. So I said, I'm from New York. And then this woman from New Zealand, she said, I thought you're Asian. I mean, it's like we're asking, where are you from? And I said, I'm from New York. And then first thing she was coming to me is like, I thought you're Asian. I mean, that is not the correct answer, but like, I just couldn't believe what she said. I said, a lot of Asians live in New York City, New York, and then Asian are American as well too. There's a lot of questions that I hear. Oh, but I thought this is going back to the same question about where you're from. Oh, I thought you're not American. You look like Asian. So I said, there's a lot of Asian American in America, and, it doesn't follow them. And then I feel that, as my main anchor poem could say, that way we look because of how our face, hair, all that, even though you think you belong there, but you always feel not belong. I mean, I don't know if it doesn't make sense to you, but that is always the feelings going around. But after I met Janice, and then hearing her poem, and also having conversation with her and Mary, was make me feel I have a place to go and talk about these feelings very authentically, and then without the judgment. And then they are like, after, even though after March 16, we have like this love conversation going back and forth with the Janice and Mary, big sisters, and when we're gonna get together, you know. And it was suddenly shocked that she was gone just a couple months after that. And we really thought like we are able to meet in person physically. Mary met Janice, but I never met her in person. So that was one of my regrets. But I think her legacy get into me very much. And then how her poem is very transparent and not fear to talk about her truth. And that even though when she was speaking and talking and reading her poems, everything was so authentic. And somehow it brings me strength. And then it's almost saying, yes, you don't have to be hiding your true feelings. You could speak up. You could say what you need to say. That was her encouragement through love she's giving me. And then because of what we're doing, you know, this event today, and then I've been walking miles and miles today, and then I was thinking about Janice and Mary, thinking about the conversation, and especially maybe many of you know, it's like, you know, Korean and Japanese, they're not really friendly to each other, and then there's always kind of awkward feeling. But I think it just breaking the wall, and then it also helps me to understand what's to being human. And through just Mary read that poem about the trauma, she was really able to spell it out, that it gets to our bones. And also it gives me strength, and just like Mary got a lot of influence by her, that I wanted to be more authentic and truthful to my writing that gives to me in today. So through our conversation, she helps me to enrich through my writing, and then being authentic. And also Mary just said that, like she said, I love you, that's not like her. But I think maybe she knew that she has to say it. But I believe she is with us and listening our conversation right now, somewhere, you know, in spirit. And then I feel like she's smiling at us. And yeah, I didn't have a really, like, you know, a lot of connection with her. I just known her just a couple months through Zoom. But then she gives me a lot of strength and depth, and helped me to be who I am. So I am just so thankful for our time together. So that's all I could say at this moment. And I just wanted to share one poem that she wrote. Somehow it just connected to my heart right now. So I'm gonna read that poem called For a Daughter Who Leaves. More than germs in my box shape by the god of the sea. I praise you, my daughter. Lady Otomo, 8th century Japan. That's her epigraph. Her daughter's wedding slippers that will carry her steps into a new life. The mother weeps alone into her jeweled sewing box, slips wet thread around its stool, the same she used to stitch her daughter's first silk jacket, embroidered with turtles that would bring luck, long life. She remembers all the steps taken by her daughter's unbound quick feet, dancing on the stones of the yard among yellow butterflies and white breastfed flowers. And she grew legs strong, body long, mind independent. Now she captures all eyes with her hair combed smooth and her hips gently swaying like bamboo. The woman spins her thread from the stool of her heart, not to her daughter's departing wedding slippers. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. My mother is clapping in the background for you.
I love you.
Yeah. There's a lot of waving and all of that. So I wanna particularly thank Tanya Ko Hong for joining us from the many steps El Camino that
I know, Gran
taking on
Camino.
your amazing journey. And of course,
Yes.
now you've woven, Janice's
Mm.
legacy into that journey that you
Mm.
continue, which is so beautiful. I really appreciate you calling in and sharing your recollections and the significance of, and really the legacy. I mean, both you and Mary have had very different relationships of temporal relationships, and yet you speaking about how she gives you strength. I mean, these are things that
Mhm.
I think that, you know, I mean, she was a groundbreaker. She was the one that, went through the proverbial glass ceiling. And, as I often say, rising tide lifts all the boats. And I think that she was a person that did that wherever she went. She was bringing all the boats with her. And, you and Mary and so many others who are not here with us today, but the two of you are really sharing the truth of that matter, that was her work as much as the work that she was putting down on the page.
Mhm.
Part of that. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, I just wanted to also, I forgot to mention, but like I think after listening her poem about the camp, Japanese camp, and I did visit the Japanese camp on the California 395, the freeway. So I did go and then walk around the Japanese camp. If I didn't hear about her story, I would never go there. So that's the thing. And then also just like last thing that I think it's not just like, limit to the one individual, but she actually, through her poem, she bring us to remember and then witness all that was happening to our body and then society and then nation. I think it is so important. It's not narrowed down, just like what you said, Sandy, that like it's breaking through. So I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity again. Thank you. It's such a gift. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, that's Tanya Ko Hong joining us from the El Camino, where she is on this amazing personal journey and, you know, weaving so many things together, and really appreciate her taking the time to join us from that deep walk and deep meditation to share her stories, her connections of her time getting to know Janice Mirikitani, as well as her work and the significance that has made. Well, I want to check in very briefly. I believe that there was a person that also knew Janice. Her name is Dr. Betty, who was working with her at San Francisco State University, and she may be on the numbered call. There's a phone number, and I just want to check in if she is here with us in the program, and if not, we're going to go to our final clip of Janice's. So if you are with us, please unmute. Otherwise, okay. All right.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hello, my name is Betty Parent.
Betty Parent, very good to have, and thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to welcome you. You were a colleague and a dear friend of Janice Mirikitani at San Francisco State University, is what I understand, and that you wanted to say a few words and potentially share a poem of hers with us as well today. Is that correct?
Yes, I would like to say a few words. The poem that I was going to share has just been read, but I worked on Janice's 30-year anniversary book of her poems and other poets when she had been at Glide for 30 years, and it was really a joy to work with her. She and I are within 1 month age of each other, and we both have daughters. We both have one daughter, and the poems about daughters and talking about daughters resonated very deeply with me. And I also want to say that in Janice's time at Glide, she really emboldened and energized women to tell their story in ways that had been kept secret. Keep the secrets. Don't tell bad things about the family, that kind of thing. And Janice made us realize that we have to tell our own story and live our own story and live through it. And I treasure her so much for that. And I feel like it was such a great loss when we lost her so quickly, but also did she leave us a good grid of life to go by. So thank you very, very much for including me and for being a part of this program. Thank you.
That is Dr. Betty Parent joining us from the Bay Area. I believe from the Bay.
From Glide Church, actually.
You're actually in the Glide Church today. From the Glide.
I am, yeah.
Yes. Which of course was co-founded by Reverend Cecil Williams and Janice Mirikitani, and we're so grateful that you were able to join us briefly with the reflection of and the significance of her work from your perspective as a person who also worked has worked tirelessly alongside her to encourage people from all walks of life to be able to have the dignity they deserve, as well as to tell their stories. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Really a deep honor to have you with us. Thank you. Well, we're going to close out the program now with a final clip from the original program where you'll be hearing Janice Mirikitani to close out this program, and then I'll have a few remarks to close us out. Histories, but what is it that poetry brings that we can't get from the histories? You know, whether it's the lies of the histories or the truth of the histories, I feel like there's something that poetry brings that's different.
I feel very strongly that what poetry does is it opens the heart. That it talks about our full humanity. And what it does is it makes that connection between what is common for all of us. Pain is common for all of us. We all understand what rejection is. We all know that we need love. I mean, some of us have never had love or experienced love until one person or one community can say, I embrace you, I love you, I accept you. Poetry brings that dimension, a full dimension of selfhood to, I think, the experience, whereas history is really quite much more one-dimensional. And, you know, anybody can tell you facts about the law, about history, about culture, about, you know, food, about any topic. But until you get that experience of, oh yeah, I didn't realize my mother had such a big appetite after she ate tiles and tiles of sushi, right? I mean, that just gives you such an image of your mother. And when you talk about, oh, you know, this blonde woman to whispering this unnameable name, a word in your ear. I mean, it just brings alive how insensitive people are to one another about language and about your own soul. So I think that that's what poetry does. It brings the soul to humanity.
Wow. That's the
Are there any better words to program on than what poetry does, which is to bring the soul to humanity? I mean, spoken by the woman that we are honoring, and honoring her poetry, her legacy today, Janice Mirikitani. Open the heart to full humanity. That was from our program on May 16th, 2021, and our program today on May 19th, 2024 has been to honor that legacy and appreciate in remembrance, in memoriam, the extraordinary life of Janice Mirikitani, of Janice Mirikitani, and how her life ripples through like every moment still. Today we had 4 featured guests and Dr. Betty Parent speak to all the ways that Janice's work continues to do its extraordinary work of humanity. And I want to thank our featured guests today, Dr. Shawn Wong, who is the curator of the Classics of Asian American Literature series at the University of Washington, and brought the collection Awake in the River and Shedding Silence back into print, out of the silence, back into print. we also were joined by Tianne Feliciano, Janice's daughter, was able to bring a very personal face and voice to her mother's voice today in sharing some of what it's meant to, live with a woman who has extended her life and legacy to the service of others and to the service of poetry. Thank you so very, very much. Mary Oishi, of course. Mary Oishi, of course, is the Poet Laureate Emerita of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I hope you all will be running out and from your homes or from online to your independent bookstores and purchasing her latest collection, Sidewalk Cruise Ship, from the University of New Mexico Press. And finally, Tanya Ko Hong joins us from her epic journey on the El Camino, and her book. It again, another book you must have in your collection of poetry. If you are to embrace poetry as multidimensional and about bringing the full humanity to its fullness, her latest collection, The War Still Within, Poems of the Korean Diaspora. You can go back, of course, and view our original program on May 16th, 2021 on video. And of course, this recording will be available very, very shortly. If you care to re-listen, there's so much that I relearned and rediscovered today, even though I was sitting in this very same seat that I was sitting in 3 years ago. Our lives are very prismatic, and so repetition creates dimension. And again, that's what poetry does as well. So I want to thank all of you in the Zoom room studio with us today for your compassionate and deep listening, and as well as those of you watching us live on Zoom and those of you that'll watch the recording of this program. And let's take a moment to unmute and show our appreciation for all of our guests, including Dr. Betty Parent, who joined us from the Glide Foundation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Buddy. Well, a few final program notes from me. This is our final program of the month of May. We will be on break, and then we have our final month of programming before we go on our summer hiatus. This is quite a crescendo to the end, and this one certainly was a very, very big wave, very, very big wave, carry deep momentum as we head into June. I want to invite you to join us on June 2nd for our Poets Focus. It's our open mic where we will be examining from the perspective of the word notebook, whether that means shedding your own silences and elevating poems out of long buried notebooks of your own. You are the stars of that program, so you have a few weeks to bring the notebook forth. And then we'll be back on June 9th for our new book showcase with a feature on poets who have published hybrid work, or what might be considered non-traditional poetry, docu-poetics, memoir in poetry. And we will be welcoming back Julie Marie Wade, reading from her latest collection of lyrical essays, Otherwise, which is the 2022 Autumn House Poetry Prize, won the Autumn House Prize for essays, and the book is currently a finalist for the 2024 Lambda Literary Award, which will be announced just a few weeks after her appearance here on Cultivating Voices. Sylvia Pollack will be reading from her second collection, a memoir in verse, and Sylvia is often with us here in the program. I hope you'll come out to hear Sylvia read from her wonderful memoir in verse, and Lauren Russell, who wowed us in our first fall with her collection Descent, which was a docu-poetics collection examining the legacy and impact of the slave trade in her family, returns with her new collection, also a docu-memoir, A Window That Can Neither Open or Close, Poems, Plots, Chants. And joining us for her debut reading on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, although is no stranger to poetry, is Erin Malone reading from her astounding, haunting, and ultimately hopeful book, Site of Disappearance, a docu-memoir of sleuthing and serendipities, which was a finalist for the National Book Series in 2023. So it's going to be an incredible new book showcase on June 9th. And then we will close out the first half of 2024 with our Poetry Pride Parade. Everyone, I want to thank you so much for joining us again today. It's been deeply moving. I've got another reading tonight to host, and my guest on that program, West East Bi-Coastal Poets of the Pandemic, will be the one and only Kai Coggin. So if you're up for a double header with me, join me at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find all the information in the links on Cultivating Voices and elsewhere on the internet for that program. I hope you all have a really amazing rest of your day. Again, thank you so much to Shawn and Tianne and Mary and Tanya. And I thank all of you. Be very well, take exceptionally good care of your beloveds, and just continue to write your extraordinary poems. I'm Sandy, known for Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, with deep appreciation for Don Krieger and Kim Ports Parsons, who were instrumental behind the scenes in putting this program together. I look forward to seeing you in June. Take care, everyone.